Hello guys and welcome back to the With a Minute to Go podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel, turn notifications on, and if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. It's much appreciated. You can also find us on Spotify by typing in With a Minute to Go podcast, or accessing the link via our Twitter and Instagram pages at WAMTG Pod. So again, we have Matt with us today to discuss the topic of teams vying for promotion at the top of the championship. Looking at all the clubs currently in the playoffs and automatic promotion places, plus a couple of other mentions. So before we do get into things, nice to have you with us again, mate. And quickly, congratulations on the win against Torquay last Saturday, 1-0 at home. Obviously progressing through now to the semi-final away at Hereford, and then potentially, you're one game away now from Wembley. Must be big for the club. I'm buzzing as a fan. You must be buzzing as a coach.
Yeah, first of all, it was a tough game. Torquay, a very good side. They did have, to be fair, they had a lot of players out, but were very good on the day, and we had to match them, and we had a little bit of luck towards the end. But yeah, it's fantastic for us to get through, and I don't think the club have got to a semi-final of this competition for 15 years. So yeah, we're really excited. Obviously, the way the league is at the minute, there's lots of league games before we play that semi-final. So we can't take our eye off the ball of the league game. It's still important that we pick up some points in the league. But yeah, it's at Hereford away in the semi-final, and hopefully we can get through that. And like you said, what an opportunity! Once in a lifetime opportunity to play at Wembley or go to Wembley. Just see if there's any supporters going to be able to come or not. That's the big question.
Yeah, I looked it up briefly. I think it was like the 8th of May or something, the final schedule for this year. And that's obviously, I think it's 9 days prior to when fans are supposed to be back in, which is the 17th of May. So you never know, that could be a trial event or something like that. I know there's talk about the Carabao Cup final is going to be a trial event potentially, with a certain amount of fans in. Obviously, it's Woking and whoever progresses through the other semi-final. So it won't be a packed house by any means. So you never know. Hopefully, that would be a great day out for us guys, and especially for you as well. So let's get into the episode then. Obviously, like I said, we're going to be talking about the championship today, all the clubs at the top in the promotion places, automatic and playoff. But I think it's worth mentioning, myself and Matt, we're not experts on the championship. Yes, we watch it from time to time to keep an eye out on all the clubs at the top of the league that could potentially come up and play our team, Arsenal, next year. But we don't know all the ins and outs. So feel free to message us on Instagram or Twitter, whatever, to correct us basically on anything we've said. Yeah, pretty much. So we'll move on then. We're just gonna go through all the sides in order. So we're gonna go from the top of the league right the way down to is it ninth place, I think?
I think eighth place.
Eighth place, is it? Yeah, eighth place. Yeah, the top 8 in the league. So we'll start with Norwich. So the Runaway Leaders at the top of the league, 10 points clear after their win against Brentford in the week. I think Brentford on 63, they're on 73 now. Talk us through their season. I've seen you've done a bit of research here.
Yeah, I think first of all, I don't think it's a surprise when a relegated team is then ending up around the top of the championship. I think we've seen it lots of times. First thing we can point out is the parachute payments that the Premier League provide these teams with. So they haven't got that massive drop financially. I think a little side note, I looked at a stat, and I think I mentioned it to you earlier, that I think when Wolves won the league, the championship, that is, to go up through the whole season, they made 7.4 million, I think, and that's in TV rights, and they actually get a bit of money from the Premier League, etc. And compare that to the team that finished bottom of the Premier League, got 99 million. So that just shows the differences between the two leagues financially. So the Premier League do give those payments out to those clubs relegated to allow them to adjust to life, not receiving those sorts of sums of money through mainly TV deals and whatnot. So first of all, not surprised to see Norwich up there. Obviously relegated last year. They lost two of their better players. And they were probably lucky not to lose a few more. They lost Ben Godfrey, obviously doing very well with Everton this year, and Jamal Lewis, who probably hasn't had the same effect at Newcastle. But to be honest, what we saw from their team last year, he would certainly be one of the players you'd look at and think, actually, he could do a good job in the Premier League. I mean, they managed to keep hold of Max Aarons. They managed to keep hold of Pookie, who was hit and miss in the Premier League last year. Todd Cantwell as well, that everyone sort of liked, and that Ben Deer as well. We talk about, obviously been heavily linked with Arsenal. In the summer and again in January. But again, go back to Pookie, 18 goals in the league this year. I think if any team's going to come up, you need that goal scorer. He's proven in the Championship. Had a really good start to the Premier League last year, but sort of faded away. Ben Deer, again, as we talk about, 10 goals, 10 assists. That's the quality of player he is. And, I've seen him enough times to know that he'd be good in the Premier League, and in a better Premier League team, I think he'd be good. So going back to it, they obviously lost a centre-half and a left-back. They were able to bring in Ben Gibson on loan from Burnley, which I think is quite a good signing, and he's slotted in well there. And they brought in a Greek left-back, and I'll try and butcher his name, Giannolis from PAOK. And what I've read and seen about him seems to have done really well. They're flying. They've won 5 out of the last 5. Like you said, they're 10 points clear. Still lots of games to play, but you would imagine there'll be a Premier League team next year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was going to say, barring an extremely poor run, it does look like Norwich will be promoted back to the Premier League at the first time of asking. In your mind, what do you think they have to do differently in order to retain that Premier League status, to avoid a repeat of 2019-20?
I think one thing that was sort of labelled at Norwich last year was the style of football. They did want to play. They did want to play out. They would want to play through the third. That was the way that the manager wanted to set them up, and that's great. But when you're not getting results, that is an issue. And it got to a stage where actually, a long while before the end of the season, you knew they're probably going to go down. And they carried on. They didn't really change that philosophy as such. But under Daniel Farke, that's the way he wants to play. Does he change that up if they come back up this year? I'd like to think there's going to be a little bit more flexibility to their play. But that was certainly something that was labelled at them last year. I remember watching them on a few times where they're giving teams good games, but making silly individual errors, playing that style of football, which actually maybe they need to adjust and change that a little bit. Again, financially, are they in a position to put a bit of money in and bring in some better quality players if they are to get up, possibly? But it's one thing we've seen with Norwich. We haven't really seen them have that sustained period of time in the Premier League. They're very much, I'm not sure of the stats, but they come up for a season or maybe 2, and then they'll go back down there. Probably a yo-yo team. So it's whether they're able to now make the next step, financially to make them an established Premier League club.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember last year watching them at the start of the year. They beat Man City at home. So they were competing with the top clubs. Towards Christmas, they drew 2-2 with Arsenal as well. Played very well. Overall, that deterioration was steady across the season. So it was a shame to see them go down, because they've been a bit up and down. Obviously, 13-14, 2015-16 relegated again. So if they do come up, it'll be interesting to see what they change. But obviously, we've discussed their attacking threats, the likes of Pookie, Buendia, Cantwell. That's evident in their team. Where do you think their vulnerability lies? I'd say, obviously, in the defence. 2019-20, again, going back to that season, a goal difference of -49. Will they have to make a bit of a bold move and completely redesign that back line if they want any success in the Premier League?
Well, I think they have already, haven't they? I think obviously losing Godfrey and Lewis, as we spoke about, and replacing them with Gibson and Giannolis. Again, the Championship is a great league, competitive league. I don't think there's many divisions across Europe that have a second league as strong as what we have here in England. But the difference from defending against a mid-table bottom Championship team and playing against your Manchester Cities or Liverpool is massive. I think, you know, the way Norwich are, if you're down the bottom, you're going to have a goal difference of -49. That's the way it happens. And like you said, there's goals in the team. You know, Pukki's obviously scored a lot this year. Can he score that sort of weight of goals in the Premier League? I'm not so sure. Possibly. You know, Bendia, even if they go up, I'm not so sure that they'll keep hold of him if he continues the form he's on at the minute. You know, there was talk also about Cantwell. So yes, we can talk about the midfield and defence being an issue, but actually I look at the forward line and say, actually, can they keep hold of those sort of players? You know, even if they do go back up into the Premier League, I think, you know, some of them will certainly be sought after.
Yeah, I think on their day, like I said, we saw at the start of last season, the likes of Pukki, especially, lethal in front of goal. And he started the year really well and just fell off. So I think it's about bridging that gap between the Championship and the Premier League and actually carrying on that consistency, you know, that certainly I've seen week in, week out, just looking at the results for Norwich. And he's been a real staple of that team, carrying them to 10 points clear already come March. So we'll move on to Brentford, currently sitting pretty in second place in the Championship. A side who I think they've threatened for promotion for a number of years. Got into the playoffs in their first Championship season back in 2014-15, and they've hovered around that top six, especially in the last 3 years. Obviously, last year narrowly missed out on promotion to Fulham in the playoff final. What's gone right for them this season, do you think?
I don't think you can get past the word recruitment. And I think, I wouldn't say every team is jealous, but they have a way of doing things, you know, which doesn't involve spending big amounts of money. And they're able to bring players into the football club that not only fit their style and are top end players for the division, but also players that, if you look at a business model, are going to go and make money for them going forward. You know, you think of the likes of Ollie Watkins, Ben Rama as well, that have obviously moved on this summer, just gone, both into the Premier League, both doing well in the Premier League as well, that have brought big money into the club. You know, I think both are around 30 million. I think Watkins cost them a little bit of money from Exeter, and I'd imagine there'd been a sell on. Ben Rama, I think maybe it was 5 million they brought him in for. You know, and they have the knack of not only bringing these players in and selling them on, but then also replacing them. If you look at, I think we're going to talk about Ivan Toney in a minute, but if you just look at the first team to have a player score 25 or more goals in the Championship for 3 consecutive years. You look at Neil Malpay, who did that, got a move to Brighton. I can't tell you how much Brighton paid for him, but it was definitely double figures. Then Ollie Watkins, who was still in the team then, but playing wide, comes down the middle. He scores 25 goals. He gets his move to Villa. You know, then they go. Everyone thinks, oh, Brentford are in trouble here. They go and spend 5 million on Ivan Toney from League One. He comes in, he's got 25 goals and 9 assists already for £5 million. You know, I think, and there'll be a host of Premier League clubs. Well, I know for a fact there's a host of Premier League clubs that are sniffing around him. And if Brentford don't go up, he's on his way. There's no way they're keeping hold of him, because I think what I've seen of him, he is a number 9. He's a clinical goal scorer, and he will score goals in any team, especially a big Premier League team are going to create the chances for him. So that's what's gone right for them. They're able to replace players that they lose. You know, I thought they were very unlucky not to go up last year. I thought they had the best team apart from the 2 that had already gone up automatically. Well, to be honest, I thought they had a better team than West Brom. You know, I think as well, Brentford messed up really because they had enough chances to go up automatically, and they fell at the final hurdle, and again in the playoffs. But they haven't really lost any players bar those 2. They've kept hold of the majority of the squad. You know, I think it's a good place to play. They obviously moved into a new stadium. They've got some really good players. Players I really like. You know, and again, they've done well this year. They've had a bit of a wobble recently. They lost 3 of the last 5. They lost obviously at Norwich in the week, which was a big result for both teams because Norwich are able to stretch their lead. I think this could be the year for Brentford. I really think it could be.
Yeah, I really do think it's a mix of that recruitment, which we just said is fantastic, and we've known it for a long time now. But also players stepping up. I look at players like Sergio Canos, Josh Da Silva, who maybe didn't impress too much last year. I know Josh Da Silva was a bit of a debatable one, but this year been fantastic. Also, the recruitment side of things, people like Tarek Fosu, Saman Ghoddos stepped up, and they've been fantastic this year from what I've seen, alongside Ivan Toney, which is 25 goals and 9 assists for 5 million is not a bad return for his first season in the Championship. So good stuff. And
yeah, I think if Tony gets the praise, of course he does. 25 goals. You look like you mentioned Fosu, come from Oxford. They signed Shannon Baptiste from Oxford, who had spells in non-league football. Went back from there and was at Oxford, done really well at Oxford and got the move. They're very good at picking those players. We talked about Watkins earlier coming from Exeter. They're very good eye for picking those players and bringing them through. And they're not necessarily proven at the level at the time when they bought them, but they've come in. I know what you said about Josh Da Silva. I really like Josh Da Silva. I think he has, I think physically he's got some great attributes. Technically he's very good, and I can see him getting better and better with age. It is a remarkable club that have got this way of going, and I know it stems from the owner and the chairman who have this philosophy, and I know they've got links with Denmark and Michelin in Denmark, and they've done similar things here. I know Brentford have brought players in from Denmark before. Let's say the recruitment has been superb.
I think the obvious question that I've got to ask is, why do you think Brentford have come so close on many occasions, but failed to make it count at the back end of the season? I don't want to be too harsh, but could there be a suggestion of maybe a weak-minded mentality set in at the football club or within the players?
Difficult one to put your finger on. I think you could look at maybe quite a young group of players. They still are quite young, but you look at the likes of Potters Janssen, obviously club captain. The January signing they made of Winston Reid will only help that. Really good. I'll be honest, he fell off the face of the earth for me. I completely forgot that he was even playing. I didn't know he was still at West Ham, but he'll only help in that sense. And I think sometimes when you have gone so close and fallen at the final hurdle as they did automatically and in the playoffs, first obviously it's going to drive you to do better, but you learn from those mistakes and the things. The manager has been really good. Again, we could talk recruitment on managers. They've had Dean Smith obviously did well there, and he obviously then was cherry picked to go to Aston Villa. They brought in Thomas Frank again. Has been great for them. So look, that's I think maybe a little bit of naivety. I wouldn't say, I think it'd be unfair to say a team is weak-minded or weak mentality. I think that would be unfair. And again, I think, that league is a very tough league. And as much as you can get on a run of games where you can win 5 or 6 on the spin, 7 or 8 on the spin, you could also get yourself into a rut where you lose 6 or 7 on the spin. And for Brentford as a club, you got to think they've never been in the Premier League. There's big pressure on them.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And we bang on about the Brentford's recruitment, and especially in the top half of the pitch. It's been fantastic for some time. Obviously, we've said the likes of Moore, Ollie Watkins, and now Ivan Toney. What do you think Brentford need to add to make that jump from the Championship to the Premier League and even closer reality?
I don't think they need to have much to get to the Premier League. When they get there, it'll be interesting. I think if they do I think the squad is good enough to get to the Premier League, and I think we'll talk about some other clubs who maybe have better squads on paper, bigger names. But I think the quality is there with Brentford. Again, it'll be, can they get themselves over the line, whether it's automatic or whether through the playoffs. I think, it's very tight at the top of the minute with still a few games to go. But I think if they do then get up, it'll be a question of can they keep hold of your Ivan Tonys? Can you keep hold of Jensen? Can you keep hold of those sort of players in the team? You know, I think they've got a good nucleus of a team, and then it'd be adding to it. And I'll be honest, I think they're an attractive club for a player who maybe is at a top Premier League club at the minute and not getting a game. I think they're an attractive club to go to. They play football in the right way. You know, so maybe through the loan market, bringing in players. I'm thinking still off the top of my head, players at our club that will go there and probably play most weeks. That would be good for them. And the end of the day, that again, we look at recruitment. I've got no concerns on Brentford if they did get to Premier League that they wouldn't have recruitment in place to bring in players that were good enough to play for Brentford and play for Brentford in the Premier League.
Yeah, I really do think that's the interesting thing. Once they do get there, who they buy and why they buy them. I think that'd be great to see. But we won't dwell on Brentford too much. Obviously, an interesting one to talk about. But we'll move on to another one of the relegated teams from last year, flying high at the top of the Championship in Watford. I think we've both seen a lot of behind the scenes from Ben Foster's Cycling GK vlogs, which has been interesting. But from what you've seen, what have they done well this year to get themselves in such a strong position?
I think similar to Norwich, you could say. They have lost a couple of senior players. You know, they lost Decore, went to Everton, and has been a great signing for Everton and a superb player. Was probably one of their, if not their standout player last year. And Etienne Capoue, another centre midfielder who moved on to Spain. But again, they've been able to keep hold of their better players. Ismail Assar, João Pedro's come in and scored goals. Obviously, Deeney's still around, although I think I read the other day he's out for possibly the rest of the season, injured, which will be interesting to see how that goes. They've still got a lot of Premier League players in there. You know, I think sometimes it gets labelled, if a team goes down or gets relegated, you know, a lot of people are quick to say, "Oh, that's the reason they got down. They're not good enough Premier League players." But I think you'll find in that team there is a lot of good Premier League players. You know, look at Cleverley in midfield. He's had to step up this year to the fact that Decore and Capoue are gone. You know, Chalobah, I really like Chalobah, to be fair. I think he's a really good player. He's stepped up. You know, they have the managerial merry-go-round at Watford, and obviously they've already seen one bite the dust this year. But that was I think it's a big turning point for them because they were struggling beforehand. And, you know, sometimes I think we just see with Chelsea at the minute, you know, people will say, hang on a minute, Frank Lampard, they're not doing that bad. You know, they're not doing that bad. New manager comes in, they're absolutely flying. Winning games, not conceding goals. So a new manager does, you know, can make a massive difference. And I think with Watford it has. I think they're doing well at the minute. I think they're, I'll say, currently third. I think they're obviously aspiration to get up. They'll have the financial situation like we talked with Norwich, where they have the payments that they can help there. I say that they've got some good players. I say Ismail Assar is certainly a Premier League player for me, and obviously had attraction from Liverpool in the summer. 8 goals, 4 assists. You know, they're kicking on. There's a lot of good players. Andre Gray got 2 goals in the week. I like Ken Sema. João Pedro scored some at the beginning, hasn't scored many recently. Obviously, we talked about Deeney being out. So I think they've got a lot of firepower there. A lot of firepower for Premier League players. I say we do see lots of footage with Ben Foster, which is great. On a side note, it's really good to see the insides of a club and how a club works. And, you know, people don't maybe understand the travel. You think the traveling they're doing, the staying overnights all the time, which everyone could think is luxurious and it's lovely staying in another hotel, but it's tough. You know, being on a coach, traveling all over the place and staying overnight here, getting up and whatnot. So, you know, that it's great to see that inside of a club.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up really nicely. But it's Watford, so I've got to go back to the manager situation. Obviously, a club notorious for a numerous amount of changes behind the scenes, most notably in the public eye, is the managers, especially since they've been promoted to the Premier League in 2015 onwards. Even this year, again, like you've said, with their season going okay, you know, pretty well, they sacked their manager and they're on to their second guy. Do you think maybe that contributed to their demise in 2019-20, having such an erratic sort of, you know, the amount of managers was such a big number.
I think it's gonna at some point, isn't it? I think it's gonna catch up with you. Obviously, you think the start of last season they had Javi Gracia in, who took them to their first FA Cup final. You know, I remember meeting him personally when they played Woking in the third round, and was a great guy. I think he still stays in contact with our manager at Woking now, which is a bit crazy. They send texts. I think he put his net. You know, we did an initiative at the beginning of the season, putting your name on the shirt, and he did that, and we sent him a shirt. You know, he's currently Valencia manager, so he's not doing too bad for himself. You know, he was swiftly moved on. I think it was a little bit early, but they were in a bad position by the time he left, to be fair. You know, they brought Kike Flores back in, who they'd had previous, which when that happens, I always think, I'm not sure about that. You know, he only lasted 12 games, I think, which is mental. But again, that's Watford. You know, they then have caretakers, Nigel Pearson come in, which I thought was a good appointment at the time, because he is someone who, you know, has previous with keeping clubs up, and you know, he's in the similar mold to Sam Allardyce's. Now he's going to come in and firefight and get you out of situations, but that didn't work. I think there was a disagreement over the lockdown period, wasn't it? And ended up with obviously the caretaker. And to be honest, you think back to the final day of the season, they lost at Arsenal, and if they'd have won, they'd have stayed up. And they had a hell of a, you know, they were I think 2 or 3-0 down quite early, but they had a hell of a lot of chances to get something out of that game in the end. I think Danny Welbeck missed 2 or 3 chances, and they were very close. But yeah, like you said, you know, you took 3 permanent managers last year plus a caretaker. They've had 2 permanent managers this season already. You know, at some point there's got to be some sort of there's a bit more structure. You know, every manager that comes in will have a slightly different way they want to play. You know, if you're Nigel Pearson, for example, you've already got 2 managers worth of players that they've signed and whatnot, and maybe not your cup of tea or what you want and how you want to build your team. So, you know, that can become really difficult when you've got to take over another group of players. So yeah, I mean, if they can stick with this manager for longer than 5 minutes, then they've got themselves a good chance of getting themselves back up.
I was actually watching an interview from Ben Foster. I think it was the second last game of the 2019-20 season, and he was very quick to play down the guy interviewing him was basically saying how, you know, so many managers probably has such an effect on the players, and he was basically saying, well, no, it's down to individual performances. But even then, to get that structure in at a club and really enforce the way you want to play football, it's always going to have an effect to have 3 or 4 different people coming in and changing those sets of principles every single time. We obviously mentioned the squad and the quality of players they've got. A lot of them Premier League standards. Other than, I think, Doucouré, obviously to Everton, Deulofeu and Etienne Capoue, they've managed to keep that core squad from the Premier League years. I think that must be helping them in their quest for promotion this year.
I think so. I think if you've got the best players, you've got the best chance of coming up now. That's a basic, obvious thing. And like you said, they have got some really good players. If you think, you know, you read through the squad, like you said, Ben Foster, for me, he's a Premier League goalkeeper. You know, Troy Deeney, all right, maybe he's latter years now, but he is still certainly someone who's quality. Say João Pedro, Messina, Ken Sema, Chalobah, Cathcart. They're all players that have played. Will Hughes, Andre Gray. We keep going. You know, they're all players who, they've come down with Watford, but they've all played a lot of Premier League games. You know, and I think that's really helped them. I say that they even went through the rail. They signed Carlos Sanchez, who was at Villa a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if he's played many games, but again, another clever signing. And they'll be there or thereabouts. I think they'll be a playoff team for sure this year. And it's whether they can, you know, it becomes a lottery then.
I'm not sure about automatic promotion, but I definitely think they'll be looking to get that, you know, for promotion through the playoffs, and they'll be a tough one for any side to come up against. So we'll move on to our 4th team, and Swansea City, a regular fixture in the Premier League from 2011 to 2018, I think it's fair to say. They're sitting in fourth, and they'll be desperate to regain their status as a Premier League club after 3 seasons away from the big time. How have they been looking this year?
I think they've done really well. I've been impressed with them because I think they haven't necessarily got the names that you'd expect that they maybe your Norwiches or Watfords have got, but they play a good style of football. I watched a bit of their game. They played Man City in the cup, and no, you got to take it with a pinch of salt because you're playing Man City, but they look well. Their recruitment over the summer was good. Obviously they come off the last year. They lost in the semi-final of the playoffs, so they were a playoff team last year. They lost to Brentford over 2 legs. I think they beat Brentford in the first leg and lost in the replay, or in the second leg. Sorry, but they didn't really lose many in the summer, which was good. Joe Rodon was probably the main one who's gone to Spurs, and actually, to be fair, when I've seen him play for Spurs, he's done really well. I didn't really know much about him when Spurs signed him. Obviously, he's only young, but he's done well. They brought in a few players. They replaced Rodon. They've got in a couple lad from Chelsea and Ryan Bennett from Wolves, who was on loan at Leicester last year, I think, but didn't really play. And again, obviously, that was a position that they thought that they needed to address. They signed Jamal Lowe from Wigan, who I know lots about because of our manager and the influence he had in his career. And he's had a great partnership with Andre Ayew up front. They've both bagged goals. Any side who's got aspirations, ambitions of getting up's got to have that number 9 to get the goals. And with the two of them scoring quite a few each, then that gives them a chance. They've used the loan market really well. They've got 5 in on loan. If I look at the loans, like Freddie Woodman in goal, I think they had last year as well, solid from Newcastle. They know what they're getting. They say they got Mark Guéhi from Chelsea as a centre half option. They've got a couple of lads from the MLS, which is interesting. I'm not sure if there's a link there between Swansea or whether there's a coach that's come from over there that's got knowledge. And the biggest one for me is Conor Hourihane they got in the window. I think in the January window is a fantastic sign for them. Already scored a few goals, and again, looking at a player like him, played a lot of games. Maybe not so many in the Premier League, but a lot of Championship games. He was in part of the Villa side that obviously were promoted through the playoffs. They beat Derby. So he'll bring that experience and a bit of quality to the team. And again, if they're going to be in around it, he's going to be a massive factor in that.
Yeah, I think again, quickly looking on recruitment, and we've mentioned it for the teams that we've already talked about and the teams that we will talk about, because it's such an important thing for those clubs looking to get into the Premier League. Swansea have done some clever business, like you said, bringing in Hourihane on loan from Villa, who had a decent season from what I saw last year at Villa, and Ryan Bennett from Wolves. In 2018-19, he was instrumental in that back three for Wolves. I remember one of the games at the Emirates, they drew 1-1, and he was fantastic alongside Willy Bolly and Connor Cody. How much would you say that squad have really benefited from having Premier League experience in their ranks, of those two players especially?
I think that's always going to help, isn't it? I think experience is certainly going to help. But, I think that you look at the manager, and I think actually what he's brought to the club, and I know you've got some notes on the recruitment of the manager. Obviously, they had Graham Potter as a previous manager, who's now at Brighton, and Steve Cooper, who is, I wouldn't say he was an unknown, but maybe an unknown to us. Obviously, I think it's his first senior job. He's been with England, set up, and Liverpool. First senior job. And has come in and done really well. He had he knows how he wants to play. He wants his players to be brave on the ball, and I think he has the players that are going to do that. And actually, if you look at him as Swansea manager, that 46% win percentage from 88 games is not bad. They probably want to improve on that a little bit more if they're going to get themselves into the playoffs and get themselves up. But I think again, there's probably a lot of they put a lot of trust in him to bring in a manager that has not managed at senior level before. But
Just quickly, you mentioned obviously Steve Cooper's experience with the youth teams at England and Liverpool.
Yeah.
And I've said he's been giving opportunities to young players. Obviously, Dan James came through and since gone on and playing for Man United. Rhian Brewster, he signed on loan. How important is it to show younger players, that you've got the confidence in them to go out there and perform and be themselves on the pitch?
Well, funny you should say that, because Steve Cooper was the England manager when they won the Under-17 World Cup.
Right.
And two goal scorers on that day was Rhian Brewster, and Mark Guéhi, and also was Morgan Gibbs White.
They signed on loan as well, didn't they?
Who they signed on loan. So yes, definitely, you want to give those young players the opportunity to thrive and whatnot, but he also has trust in them. He knows those young players, and I think that's a massive thing when you know those players. I think if you're, it's an old saying, if you're good enough, you're old enough. But there has to be that balance. There has to be that mix. Yeah. But say he's got players that he knows that he can trust and rely on. And when you have that, then with that mix of senior players, we talk about Hurahan. Then that I think Swansea are in really good hands at the minute. Andre Ayew is a senior player. You look, Ryan Bennett, senior player. He's got that mix. Jake Bidwell, another senior player. Carl Norton, senior players, but mixed in with a Mark Guéhi on loan from Chelsea, and Jamal Lowe, still relatively young. He's still got Wayne Routledge knocking about. There's a senior player for you. If
definitely.
So, but again, look, I say, I'm not watched Swansea too much, but hearing good things about them. I think they're a good side. They've got some good quality. So he's used the loan market well to bring in players that he knows will either benefit him in their youth or the other way in the experience.
Definitely. Looking at Swansea from an outsider's perspective, they've got it all right. And hopefully they can push on and maybe get promotion this year back to the Premier League. So halfway through our teams, that's 4 out of 8, and we'll move on to our common, our every week feature now, which is the scout. Obviously, we'll look at a couple of Premier League players, one person who's done well from last week, one who we think will do well this week. And quickly, before we do get into it, just a reference to last week. Unfortunately, I've jinxed another player. I'm not happy about saying that, but Harvey Barnes went off after 50 minutes against Arsenal. Knee injury, I think it was. I think he's going to be out for about 6 weeks. I saw something like that. So sorry about that, Harv. I won't pick you again, mate. Hopefully you're fit by the Euros. You can travel with that England squad. Matt, you said Rafinha. Again, that didn't go to plan. Leeds lost 1-0 at home to Villa. Not a great game. I watched that whole game, and I think that was a bit of a waste of time. It was an early goal after 5 minutes from El Ghazi, and then not much else happened. So yeah, again, our predictions were poor, but we've got to say, Sam from last week, he said Mikel Antonio to do well against Man City, and he actually scored in a losing effort, 2-1 away against Man City. He played pretty well, had a few good chances, maybe should have scored a couple more. On a different day, maybe a different player would have been 3-2. So yeah, good shout from Sam. And as ever, you and me disappointing. Hopefully this week, hopefully we can change it up this week. But you never know. Right, I'll let you go first then, as I've rambled for a while about your player from last week.
Yeah. Well, as much as it pains me to say it, I can't really look further than Gareth Bale. First of all, two goals and an assist last week against Burnley, an assist against in a losing cause the week before. Are we now starting to see a bit more of the Gareth Bale that maybe not that we expected to see? Because I think it was very mixed. Some people saying, "Yep, he's going to come back and hit the ground running." I spoke to a lot of people that thought, "Oh, I'm not sure about this signing. He's not the player he was." But maybe this is a turning point for him. I think he's had a strange few weeks. I think his relationship with Mourinho is very strange. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Mourinho. I believe Mourinho wanted him, but I don't
Yeah.
necessarily think he was a starter, or they thought he was going to be a starter as such. I think there's some comments this week that it's up to Real Madrid whether the deal is extending for another year. So that would suggest that Spurs are interested in keeping him, and the finances still work for Spurs. I know it's obviously, he's on an incredible amount of money a week, and I think Spurs are picking up half of that. But I think we're now seeing him with a run in the team. The front three that was spoke about in the summer of Kane, Son and Bale, they're playing together. I think if Spurs have the ambition to still get in the top four, which I know at the minute there's lots of teams between, in and around the mix there, but getting him on form and having him on form is going to be a massive bonus for them to push that way. So interesting to see, whether it is him now kicking on or whether that was an anomaly and it will go back to him playing 45 minutes or not being fit enough to play and whatnot. And I think longer term, I think it'd be interesting to see what he's done in the summer, because I think if you'd have said 3 or 4 weeks ago, is it beneficial for Spurs to extend the loan? You'd have probably said no, because they could spend those wages elsewhere, getting on better quality. But actually, if he's going to start producing performances we've seen recently and build a consistency, then surely he's a player that any club would want.
A lot of people talk about players coming into form at the right time. I'm not sure I buy into that, because I think players coming into form at any time is good. But actually now, especially with Bale, they've got Arsenal around the corner next week. Still in the last sort of stages of the Europa League, got a Carabao Cup final coming up. I think he'll play a big role in those games if he does push on. Again, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, they've got Son and Kane up front. They've sort of varied it around with Bergwijn, Lucas Moura, who have all seemed to have made an impact, and Lamela as well in the last couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how many opportunities he gets, and if he does, if he does really take them, how far Tottenham can go in those competitions. So I actually made my decision on this player before Matt. So I was going to say Bale, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. So I've had to go with someone who has frustrated me, and I know he's frustrated you and frustrated all the Arsenal fans this year, which is Willian. Got a couple of assists in Arsenal's 3-1 away win at Leicester. I'm not going to say he was back to his best, because I think he was and still is far from that. But it was definitely, a glimmer of hope, I think, for Arsenal fans, that we saw his potential that we've seen over 6 years at Chelsea. So you never know. We could be getting some luck there. We could be finally getting the player we thought we had back in September. But I think it's still, I think he's still a long way off where he could be. I know something came out in the week previous to the game saying about how he preferred to be at Chelsea, which was obviously quite strange. You wouldn't really expect a player of that level to be coming out and saying, I'd rather stay at a rival club. But anyway, I don't mind. He's come on, he's got a couple of assists, and we got a win away from home. So all is good.
Yeah, I think up until Saturday or Sunday, I'd have rather he was at Chelsea as well, to be fair. But like you said, I think you're first to say if a player's not doing well, and actually you got to be first to say when he did do well, and as much as he hasn't had really an impact, and probably the impact that the fans saw, and certainly the impact the manager probably thought, at the weekend he was very good. He was a catalyst for Arsenal to come back, because they found themselves 1-0 down early on, and it would have been easy for certainly this Arsenal team to really just crumble at good Leicester, although they are a little bit off form at the minute. But he led the fight back. Like you said, 2 assists. I thought his build-up play was good. I thought he got on the ball and dribbled well and moved the ball forward, which maybe Arsenal haven't done as much. So. Again, slightly similar to Bale. Could this be a one-off, or is this going to be the start of really pushing him? Because I think Arsenal will need him with the amount of games. I know, for Arsenal, I think the top 4 is probably a bit too far away. But I think in the camp and listening to interviews this week, they still believe they can get top 4. And if they have got that glimmer of hope, that small chance, they're going to need all the players to be on top form. And like you said, with the Europa League and aspirations to go far further in that, they're going to need all their players firing, a lot of games coming thick and fast.
Just quickly going back to Willian, I've seen a lot of things. Basically, he's a very well-liked character in the Arsenal dressing room and behind the scenes in training and things like that. So it is nice to finally see him getting some credit because, like you've rightly said, I think all football fans this goes for when players are doing badly or teams are doing badly, we'll jump on their backs. But also we've got to be the first to say, you know what, he played well this week and give him the credit he deserves. So this week, I'll go for my player first. I know you saw this and you were a bit not against the idea, but just unsure as to whether this one will come off, and it probably won't. But I'm going with it anyway. Mo Salah, Liverpool at home to Fulham. Yes, they've lost their last 5 home games, but at some point, that you got to think that run's going to come to an end. No, against the relegation threat in Fulham, you'd like to think Salah could get a goal or an assist, or maybe even both. So yeah, I'm across that maybe just get one right this week.
I don't think he'll play personally. I think he'll be on the bench. Obviously, he got dragged last night after an hour or so. I think Jota''s coming back. I think he'll probably play, and I think there's quite a lot of stuff going off the pitch with Mo Salah at the minute, and maybe a pending transfer that he's not happy or whatnot, or he wants to go somewhere else to finish his career or whatnot. So it'll be interesting. As I say, I think if Liverpool are going to win a game, it's going to be this weekend against Fulham. Now you've predicted it. I reckon Fulham will win 1-0. But
yeah, that's just what I wanted to hear, wasn't it? About Salah wanting to get a transfer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you never know. I'm hoping. Like I said, I'm keeping everything crossed. He might just do something this week. But then again, I have just jinxed him, so probably not. Right. Who's your player for this week?
My player this week is a goalkeeper. As I chose a goalkeeper last week, and it is Dean Henderson. He's going to have an extended run in the team because I think De Gea has gone back to Spain.
Right. Okay.
I think his wife has given birth. I think I saw that today. They put it out on his Instagram that his wife has given birth. And I think he's gone back for. So I heard on the radio this morning he's gone back, possibly out for 6 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm not really sure what the situation is there, but as obviously he played in the week and he played well against Palace, made a couple of really good saves. Away at Manchester City this weekend is going to be a massive test for him. I think if I'm looking at Dean Henderson now and he's going to get an extended run in the team, he's going to be looking, A, I want to establish myself as Man United number 1, and B, can I make myself England number 1 before the Euros? And I think that would have been my argument for him not being it, because he's not playing week in, week out. But now he's got a real good opportunity to stamp his authority ahead of the Euros. But again, it's a massive test against Manchester City. United will certainly be desperate to end that winning run, and City have been on an unbelievable run. And I don't think we spoke about it before, he would ever have predicted they'd be on a run like they are. And they have games where they've been fantastic, and there's games where they've probably ground it out a little bit more. I look at the West Ham game where they did have chances, but again, just 2-1. So if United are going to get a positive result of the weekend, he's going to have to be on top form. I think it's good for Carlisle because they get quite a bit of money over this time with the with their £10,000 an appearance at the minute, so they'll be buzzing, and hopefully they'll be hoping De Gea stays out of the team as long as possible. But again, no, seriously, I think that he is a very good goalie. I think he will go to the Euros, but whether he goes a 1, 2 or 3, I think that's up to him now, because I think if he can have a real good run in the team, there'll be a lot of people, and rightly so, that he probably could be ahead of Pickford. Although on a side note, Pickford made an unbelievable save last night against West Brom. And kept a clean sheet, and he's actually picked up his form as well. But again, it'd be interesting to see. I think it's obviously the game of the weekend. I fancy City will beat them. Just the form they're on. I think Man United aren't on a good run of form. They haven't really scored any goals at the minute. But again, you wouldn't be surprised if United went there and won. Because that's the team they are and the quality that they have.
Yeah. Well, we've seen it before with United going there in previous years. I think 2017-18. They went there and they were 2-0 down and they won 3-2. So it's just what United can do. Also, just want to say, hopefully everything's okay with David De Gea there. Congratulations, firstly, but then obviously going back for 6 weeks to Spain might be slightly concerning. Hopefully everything's
I say that's only something something that I heard online
Okay.
or on the radio, sorry, whether that's true or not. But again,
Okay.
you know, I think that's the opportunity that Dean Henderson's been waiting for.
Yeah. On Dean Henderson, I've loved what I've seen from him, especially obviously last year at Sheffield United. He was a massive part of their success. And then I think you're bang on in terms of sort of trying to cement his position as a number one for England. I think he's up against tough competition in Nick Pope, but he's going to get a run in the team now. So it'll be interesting to see how he does for United.
I think if he actually does have a run, I think he probably leapfrogs Nick Pope just on the fact of his ability to play with the ball at his feet, and obviously that's what Gareth Southgate has looked for. That's why Pickford is England's number one. Not just, you know, I think actually Pope as a goalkeeper and making saves and dealing with balls in the box, I think he's a better goalie than Pickford. But actually, the way England want to play and with that, you know, the 11th outfield player as such, I think, you know, Dean Henderson get a good run in the team. He'll definitely leapfrog Nick Pope and really, you know, rival Jordan Pickford for the summer.
Yeah, promising times for England, definitely in the goalkeeping department, which will please you. So good stuff. And nice to see you picking another goalkeeper, to have a look at for this week. But we'll get back to our championship side, so the fifth team. We're going to be looking at Reading now. Aside of a few years of Premier League experience, they've never really cemented their position though as a Premier League club. I think it's fair to say. I think they were in the league 2006-07, 07-08, and then 12-13, and not particularly successful other than that one season 06-07. Often achieving well in the Championship. I think back in 2017 they just missed out on the playoffs in the final against Huddersfield. So how have they gone this year?
Yeah, like you said, not really ever cemented. I'll be honest, when I look at Reading, I think a good solid club, a good Championship club. That's the way I look at Reading. Obviously, they've had their time in the Premier League. They had a really good first season. You mentioned 06-07, and then had a bit of a second season syndrome where they didn't. You know, I think a lot of clubs have it where because they've done so well. You look at Sheffield United this year, they don't necessarily recruit again. And then that becomes a downfall second time round. Obviously, they come up again. Was it 2013?
2012, 13.
13, yeah. And obviously only lasted 1 year. But, you know, another club who like to hire and fire with managers. They finished 14th last year, which I know was disappointing Reading fans. But I think, you know, that's where they are. They're very much hit and miss. They brought in a new manager in August, and again, I don't want to butcher his name. But I won't even try. But I say he come in August, so they've moved on a lot of their older players. You know, such as Charlie Adams, Chris Gunter, Cleary, that they've moved on, and I think that's sometimes the freshness that a new manager brings in. I think they've always had the potential ready and always had a good squad, and the consistency has always been an issue. And I'll be honest, they're I think for me they're overachieving this year. Do their supporters think they'll stay there? I'm not so sure. But they've got a chance. I think the issue they have sometimes is they'll be on a good run of form and then they'll play a home game that they should comfortably win and they'll get beat. And that has been an issue for them. I think a few weeks ago they're doing well, and then they lost at home to Millwall in a game where they dominated and conceded 2 late goals after being 1-0 up. And that's obviously chucking away 3 points. But you look at the players they brought in the summer. They brought in Ajaria on a permanent. They had him on loan last year, and I say, speaking to Reading fans, they were really impressed with him, and that's a great one to get. The interesting one for me is Lucas João, who they actually signed last season. I think they got him on a free, possibly, from it's undisclosed fee, from Sheffield Wednesday. So from a team in their league, you know, his record at Sheffield Wednesday was certainly not clinical. Over 100 games, 26 goals, but 1 in 4, 1 in 5 games.
Average.
So not bad. Yeah. But again, since he's gone to Reading, he's really has sort of blossomed as such. You know, he played just short of 50 games and 24, 25 goals. So a goal every other games. He has struggled with a little bit of injury in and out of the team, which has obviously been frustrating. He's 17 goals in the league this year. I think when I look at him as a player, 6'1", quite physically strong, got speed, runs in behind. I know you're probably going to ask me a little bit more about him in a minute, but I say someone that actually we keep banging on about it. If you're going to go up and you're going to be around the top, you need someone who's going to score the goals, and he's someone that does that. Another side note, Michael Elise, I think that's how I pronounce his name. I think he was, come through the academy, but I'm not sure he was. I might be wrong that he wasn't massively favoured in the under 23s and whatever, but it's come in the first team, 19 years old, and been really a real talent. I think he scored an unbelievable goal away at QPR in the last minute, but 9 assists, 4 goals from midfield. I think Reading have that where they will get a young player will come through. Their academy is very good. So yeah, look, exciting times for Reading. I think their fans are probably looking at it and going, oh, you know what, they're there's probably a run of bad form around the corner, but if they keep proving people wrong, that there'll certainly be a team that will be up and around it. For me, they're the one that could just drop out of it, rather than looking at a Swansea or a Watford or Brentford, or those sort of sides. They'll be the team that might just fall out of it, and maybe one of the other sides we talk about will take their place. But again, they've put themselves in a really good position at the minute.
Without saying too much, I think Reading have, like you've just said, on their academy, bringing through a couple of players there, is an interesting system they've got in place that I've actually experienced personally. Like I said, I won't go into it too much, but it seems to have worked with these few players. So fair enough, and he's come in and obviously 9 assists and 4 goals for a 19-year-old in the Championship is fantastic. But I'm going to touch on the older players. Obviously, you've said they've moved some of them on, players that have been there a while. Gunter, McCleary. And Charlie Adam as well, an older player. Something you must see at Woking, though, is the importance for clubs to have that balance of experienced heads and youth in order to bring those players through. Like what's been happening this year at Reading.
I think experience is invaluable. I won't say you can't have too much experience, but there's got to be the right blend. I've been with, I've worked under 2 different managers at Woking. And certainly one of them maybe didn't have enough experience, and at the end of that we see negative outcomes because there isn't the experienced head that sometimes will be a calming influence, can be the person who gives someone a rocket that they need at certain times, can guide the younger players, can ensure that I talk about it all the time. When you win, you're not too high. When you lose, you're not too low. And the way the games are going at the minute, they're thick and fast. You could have a really good, for example, if I talk about us at Woking, we had a massive win on Saturday, which we've touched upon in the trophy. Tuesday night, we go away and we lose against 10 men. And that's, not getting too high from the game on Saturday because you've got another one coming around the corner. And that's, the Championship is a league where it's thick and fast, coming at you all the time. Everyone could beat anyone in that league, and that's the attraction of it. And even more so this year, where we've got such a condensed fixture list that games are coming thick and fast. And that's certainly something that an experienced head can bring to the sides. And it's important you have them. To be fair, look, Reading have still got enough experienced players. Michael Morrison, Liam Moore is experienced player. You look at John Swift, who I think has been good for them this year.
Yes.
That Sonia Lucas still around. They're experienced players. Lucas Chow himself, 27, 28 years old. They still have experienced players in their side. With a mixture of younger players. I think, I think it's Omar Richards. I don't know if you saw that one the other day. He signed a pre-contract with Bayern Munich, which, coming through. I think he come through their academy, which is fantastic for the academy, or maybe not so good for the first team at the minute. But yeah, look, it's important to have that mix for sure.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about the condensed sort of timetable, I guess, one at the moment in these times. You mentioned, what it's been like at Woking, but also for these young players playing in, the Championship, the Premier League. You look at players like your Greenwood, Sackers as well, and obviously Michael Elise in the Championship with Reading. It's just important that they don't dwell too much on those performances, and actually it's important to enjoy them. But at the same time, this is a job. You've got to move on, got to do it again and keep producing it week in, week out if you want a chance of getting up to the Premier League. And also, I was going to touch on, you're right, Lucas Shaw. He's had a few injuries, but he's still managed to bag 17 goals. And actually, I had to send you a little video earlier just in case you hadn't seen too much of him. And I watched it as well, and he's, a very good player physically. He's got decent pace, decent finish on him. Do you think maybe he's Premier League quality?
That's a big question. He hasn't played in the Premier League. Like we said, before he came to Reading, his goal scoring record wasn't bad, but it wasn't anything to write home about. But sometimes a club just fits for a player. And that's something you can certainly look at Lucas João at the minute. Is it the formation? Is it the system? Is it the players? Is it he's playing in a 1? Is he playing in a 2? All these things you can think about with a centre forward. I'm not sure. I'm going to probably sit on the fence and say that possibly a Premier League club wouldn't buy him, but if he got there with Reading, then there'd be certainly an opportunity for him to see what he can do in the Premier League. But if he carries on scoring goals, and we're seeing it more often, if he carries on scoring goals and he ends up with 20, 25 goals in the Championship this year, there will be clubs looking at him in the way that clubs are looking at Ivan Toney, because to score goals like that in any league is tough, and the weight of goals, the consistency of scoring. Again, in a good team, in a good Reading team that will create chances, but you still got to be on there. Like you said in the video, he scores all manner of goals as well. What we've seen of him. Certainly a reason why Reading are up there. But again, making that next step will be interesting. And what sort of side. But you look at someone like a West Ham, or even one of the, if Reading aren't to make out one of the newly promoted sides, do they take a gamble on him that he'll get him the goals? Reading, I'm not sure what the figure that Reading paid for him, but it probably wasn't. They probably didn't think maybe they get this sort of return from him, but an astute signing.
I think it's always an interesting one to look at players and think, especially strikers, would they replicate that same form in the Premier League? Obviously, we've talked about Ivan Toney potentially if he doesn't get snapped up this year, and he actually goes with Brentford. It'd be interesting to see how he does there. And also, we touched on earlier in the episode, Teemu Pukki, another one who has done well in the Championship, went up, did okay, gone back down again, done pretty well. So it's always an interesting one. I think it really depends on the individual.
I think if you look at if you look at João's record in all competition this season, it's 20 and 29. He's scoring two and 3, which is a fantastic return. There's Premier League players, there's the best players in Europe that will be after that sort of return. So if he can continue that sort of form, not only will Reading stay around the top places in the league, but he'll certainly have some admirers from possibly the Premier League or certainly clubs from abroad.
For sure, those lower sort of Premier League sides, if he doesn't get promoted at Reading, I think they'll definitely be interested. Right, we'll move on to the lowest of the 3 Premier League sides to be relegated last year, and that's Bournemouth. Started the season towards the top of the league. I think it's fair to say they've slightly fallen away. They're still in 6th position though, with a strong chance. I think it's fair to say, given their squad, of bouncing straight back into the Premier League. So how have they looked this year?
I think it's an interesting one with Bournemouth because I think they probably got one of the best squads. I really do. Obviously, relegated last year, they parted company with Eddie Howe, who we bumped into in the summer. And then made an interesting appointment because they went, Eddie Howe was with him for a while. He was very much a Bournemouth man. I know he obviously spent a year away, but come back and got them up. With his assistant manager Jason Tindall taking charge. And to be fair, at the beginning of the season, they started really well. They started the season brightly and it slowly dropped off. Obviously you can imagine the ambition is to get back to the Premier League. You can just look at that with the players that they managed to keep hold of, but also the players, obviously they've had to let a few go. Obviously Nathan Ake went to Man City for big money, which obviously hasn't really worked out as well as he thought. You go Callum Wilson, Ryan Fraser, who obviously we had a weird situation with him when they come back from the COVID break that he wasn't going to play anymore because his contract was up. Obviously, Aaron Ramsdale's moved on now and gone to Sheffield United and Jordan Ibe as well. So, a lot of those players left, but still, when you look through their squad and you look at the quality they've got in there, and the Premier League experience, Begovic, the sign of Jack Wilshere, they brought in Shane Long on loan, Lewis Cook, Premier League player, Stanislas, there is some good quality players in there, and Philip Billing again, who I like and was good at Huddersfield. So they've got the quality there, and again, the ambition would have been to go up. And I think when the board are seeing that the team are dropping outside the playoffs, and they're looking at the quality of the teams that we've spoken about already, when you're down there, it's difficult for you to get back in. You look at Norwich are going to be relentless. You think that Brentford and Watford are going to be relentless now for the rest of the season and winning games and keeping themselves around there. So once you get out of it, it's difficult to get back in. So I think they obviously made a decision. It's an interesting one. They brought Jonathan Woodgate in as caretaker. There was lots of talk that Thierry Henry was going to take the job, which I don't know how true it was or how close he came. Then Woodgate was announced on a permanent. An interesting one, because obviously he had a spell at Middlesbrough as manager.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I say Bournemouth have decided that he is the man to get him back up. So be interesting. As I say, I only spent a year at Middlesbrough. Time will be said. I think that he did some good things there, but obviously he was sacked because the club were just outside the relegation zone. So, he was replaced by another firefighter manager, Neil Warnock, because that was the situation Middlesbrough were in. But again, Bournemouth have, like the first appointment and bringing in Tyndall was an interesting one. This is also an interesting one. I think he's had a bit of help from Harry Redknapp, possibly. I think Joe Jordan's now gone in as a coach, so he's got some experience behind him, which I think could be good. I think again that they've bought well. A player you mentioned the other week, Ben Pearson, who's come in. I'm not sure he's played a lot of games, but certainly one of the better players in the Championship that they've managed to bring in. Obviously, recently signed Jack Wilshere on a free. Although I think he got sent off the other week.
Yes,
But again, if he's someone, again, we'll keep saying about Jack Wilshere, if they can keep him fit, what a player to have, especially at the Championship. They brought Begovic back in from the cold. He was on loan at Milan and wasn't going to get a look in last year. Now he's coming in and playing, and what an experienced goalkeeper to have. The amount of games he's played for Stoke. Obviously, didn't play a lot at Chelsea, but was in and around at Chelsea. Played nearly 100 games for Bournemouth, but then was out of the team for nearly 2 seasons. So he's come back in and done well, and having some of that sort of experience that we mentioned. So and then just looking on the goal scoring front, finally Dominic Solanke is hitting the straps. I don't want to say that he's found his level, because I think that's a little bit bit harsh. But you certainly could have said that, for someone who had such a good academy upbringing and whatnot, and was banging in the goals for Chelsea at youth level and under 23 level, never really happened for him. He went a strange move to Liverpool, but didn't score any goals, and he's first two seasons at Bournemouth scored 3 goals in 40 odd games, but he's starting to score, not prolifically, but 1 in 3. He's scoring goals. They've got Stanislas as well. I think a bit of a penalty merchant, is he not?
he is. Yeah, definitely.
But again, scoring goals, and I think they're gonna need that to get him up there. Obviously 6th at the minute, which just means they scrape in. They'll have ambitions for sure of still being automatic, and I think with the squad they still got that chance.
I think just on Jack Wilshere quickly, you're saying it, obviously if they do keep him fit, he'd be one hell of a player to have around, especially if they did want to go back to the Premier League. I think it was either in the past week or the week before, he came out and has basically said his time at Arsenal didn't go sort of to plan because he didn't really listen to the physios and what they've said about, controlling his game time and recovery and all that sort of stuff. So, as Arsenal fans, what could have been if he did do that? But in terms of their squad and what I've seen this year, I think I've got to agree they're the strongest side in the league. You mentioned obviously Begovic, you just said Wilshere, Stanislas having a decent season, even though he is a penalty merchant, and maybe being sixth. There's an argument for Bournemouth underachieving that position. I don't know if that's harsh. Would you say not being promoted would be a disappointment for Bournemouth this year?
Well, I think certainly the board must have thought they were underachieving, because that's why they've moved the manager on, and brought in a new manager. And I think he's done all right, Woodgate, to be fair. Obviously, they've lost a couple of games. I think they lost to Cardiff. I know we'll come on to in a bit. They lost a couple of weeks back to Cardiff. But the ambition's got to be there. I think, it certainly is a disappointment. I'd imagine they're paying a lot of money to these players as well. They won't be on Premier League contracts anymore, but they'll be on good money. They're good players, and there's certainly more of these that could probably play in a Premier League team. It'd be interesting to see if they don't go up, how they do go. But as I say, they still have the parachute payments, whether they use that money in terms of wages or use to something else. It'd be interesting to see.
Just very quickly before we do move on to Barnsley, just want to say, they've let the key players go. People like Ake and Fraser obviously just ran down his contract towards the end of last season, but they definitely brought in decent players. Like you've said, I do rave about Ben Pearson. What I've seen, just 2 or 3 games, has been fantastic for them. Dominic Solanke, just to name a couple. I think it's fair to say their recruitment does completely embody the side have ambitions to go back to the Premier League and stay there. But we'll move on to Barnsley. Well, looking at this was, I hadn't looked at the Championship table for a while, I've got to be honest, especially towards the top. I think the last time I had a look properly was sort of January, December. I was very surprised to see Barnsley up there. I think nobody would have tipped Barnsley to be doing this well at this point of the year, at the start of the season. If I were really flattered between the top League One and the lower half of the Championship. Obviously this year now flying, they're just one place outside of the playoffs. I think it's fair to say we both of us don't know a great deal about Barnsley, but from what you found out, what do you think their real key to success has been this year?
I think it is a real big story, because if you look at last season they avoided relegation on the last day, which was obviously massive for the club. New manager coming in the summer, Ismail. I'm not sure, again on pronunciations. Apologies for all those Barnsley fans that'll be listening. But I think, to be fair, I have watched them once this year when they played Chelsea, and I was quite impressed, with how they were that night. They created some good chances. I think we spoke about it on our FA Cup episode. They had a couple of really good chances. They've got some good quality players. You look at Corley Woodrow come through at Fulham, and he's their top scorer.
Actually, just quickly, after that Chelsea game, they did go on the Sunday and they beat Brentford. So they proved fairly that they looked decent on that particular night.
Yeah, well, I say I'm not surprised about that result. As I say, Corley Woodrow up front, scoring 10 goals, top scorer. Obviously, off the back of last year, defensively they need to improve, and they must have improved, and they did. They brought in Helik from Poland, Polish centre back, who's been probably their best player this year. Certainly, the stats suggest that he's made a massive impact for them in the team. There's some really good players that I like in there. Alex Moa and Callum Stiles I really like, and they're five wins on the spin, which for any team is massive. And they say they've gone on a hell of a run. And when you do in this sort of league, and we keep talking about it with the way the games are coming thick and fast, winning 5 games on the spin and will get you so far up the league. I think you think in a week, if you're playing Saturday, Tuesday every week, in a week you can make 6 points up on someone so easily. And that's the advantage and disadvantage of the way this season pans out. But I say reading into the manager, I think he's been obviously been great for them. They haven't, I think there's an interview with him I read, and he said that the transfer window just gone was massive because they were worried about losing their better players, Alex Moa and Stiles, the like. Especially after them being in the shop window. Against Chelsea, and again the win against Brentford after that. So that was a massive thing. They astute with their business in the January window. One I'm really interested to see a little bit more of is the signing that he did actually come on against Chelsea. Daryl Dike, he's a centre forward, come from the MLS, was a loan from Orlando, which will be interesting to see how he goes. He got the winner in the week, or he scored in the week, sorry, against QPR. They're a really good win at QPR away. Again, a big striker, 6'1", physically good. Come through the college system in America, and scored 8 in 17 at Orlando, and has got to move over here. I think he's played one game for USA as well. Be interesting to see how he is for the second part of the season. We've touched on it with every team. If they're going to push themselves up and stay around that, then they're going to need goals. Can he be one that provides the goals? Possibly. But he's one certainly to have a look at. Again, I'm not sure whether there's a link with them and the MLS. I think one of their previous managers, to be fair, had managed it, or went on to, I think he's gone on to manage Red Bulls, but I'm not sure that was quite the same. But I say, they're flying at the minute. When you get on that run of form, that's going to get you up the league. I like the style they have. Say, watching them against Chelsea, I think they were probably value for a point. Well, not a point, but a draw in the cup against Chelsea. But the bit of quality at the end from Chelsea beating.
Again, I think it really does come down to the condensed, well, even more condensed than usual Championship fixture list. Obviously, it's quite a quick turnaround. Usually, you get Saturday and Tuesday games, but now you get sort of games on a Saturday, Sunday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, every day of the week. And there's one tonight. I think Huddersfield, Cardiff, or something like that. So actually, I think when you do get on that run of games and you're playing sort of 3 games a week, another couple of games, you get 5 wins. You're right up there, and also without dwelling too much on Brentford, that sort of had a detrimental effect on them as well, because they're a couple of points clear. Lose 3 games on the trot, all of a sudden they're 10 points behind Norwich at the top. So it goes both ways in the Championship, and actually that's why some teams it benefits them, some teams it doesn't, and it just happens for Barnsley that they've benefited massively from this schedule. Just quickly before we do move on, it is nice to see new teams up and around the playoffs. I think you'd agree. Most of the teams we've touched on already, and the next one, which is Cardiff, that they're always the same teams that are up around that sort of positions. I'm not sure if they'll have the same firepower at Barnsley to match those sorts of Bournemouths, Watfords, but it'd be interesting to see if they do get into the playoffs how they'd fare. So our last team of the episode to look at is Cardiff, a team we've only had a couple of seasons in the Premier League, and they've actually been relegated twice. But they're always, a potent threat at the top of the Championship. So in your opinion, what's been going well for them this year?
Well, I think not so much until 10 games ago, where they moved on their Neil Harris, who was doing okay, and obviously not, and bringing in an experienced manager in Mick McCarthy, who has turned the club around no end. I don't think any supporter probably ever thought that they would turn around like this. They're unbeaten in 10. They're flying up the table. So we now see them right on the cusp of the playoffs. It's been a massive change for them. You look at, I can't go any further without mentioning Kiefer Moore, who has gone in there, signed this summer, and gone in and bagging 1 in 2. 16 goals already in the league. He scores 1 in 3 for his country as well. I'm just looking at his record now. He's come from playing at Truro, in the probably regional leagues, and really built his way up. Forest Green in the National League at Torquay, where he scored 5 in 4. He's a goal scorer wherever he's been. The only time he hasn't scored goals was he was at Norwich. Ipswich. Sorry.
Right.
So a great signing. Obviously, I'm not sure he's properly Welsh. He wasn't born in Wales, but obviously he's playing for Wales, and Cardiff took the punt on him. And he real battering ram. Looks at a big player, 6'5". He's physically very good. I think he scored. He's not going to be a forward that runs in behind, but he's certainly going to score goals. he's been a massive part of it for Cardiff. But again, credit to Mick McCarthy, because when he come in, you know, the Cardiff obviously underachieving, and he's come in there, and I think he was on a contract to the end of the season, and I think the other day he's just signed a 2-year extension on that.
Right.
And that's, you know, unbelievable to turn around like he has. But we talked about it earlier, how a manager, you know, might have the tools to get a team playing the way that they want to play. And I say Neil Harris is you know, he was there for a couple of years, I think. You know, it just didn't work for him. Obviously done well at Millwall before, but say credit to Mick McCarthy, and I think they've certainly got the quality to go in and push for the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, definitely this year. I think, like you've said, they weren't really going anywhere, and then Mick McCarthy's come in and they're unbeaten in the last 10 games. So fair play to Mick McCarthy. I've got to be honest, I had a look at Cardiff and I didn't really expect them to do that. So fair enough. Another point was, I can see you've written here Harry Wilson on loan from Liverpool. After, you know, his loan spell didn't really work out at Bournemouth. And I actually think a regular fixture throughout this podcast has been Championship teams recruiting those Premier League quality players. And that's really why they're in such a good position in the league and challenging for that promotion. So what I'd say to you is, do you think playing with that high quality player actually lifts the whole morale and work ethic of the squad, and almost feeling like they want to prove to these players coming down and to themselves that maybe they're good enough for the Premier League level?
I think it's more Harry Wilson proving he can do it, or players of that ilk, that rather than the other way around, that, you know, a Premier League player comes in the dressing room, you've got to prove to him you're good enough, sort of thing. You know, the reason that Harry Wilson is at Cardiff at the minute is because he's not a Premier League player. He's not good enough to be a Premier League player, because if he was, you know, he'd be playing in Liverpool's team, or he'd be on loan in a Premier League club. You know, he played 31 league games last year for Bournemouth in the Premier League.
And they got relegated.
And they got relegated, or he didn't do enough to get another deal with another Premier League club, or you know, I think, you know, he's a long way off maybe being in Liverpool. So, you know, I think it's more for him to prove that actually he can cut it at the Championship level, or he's too good for the Championship level. And he's done all right. You know, his goals and assists return possibly, you know, maybe not as good as what he thought it could be, or what maybe they thought it would be. Obviously, he is an interesting player. He done well at Derby. That was where he done really well in the Championship. And I guess off the back of that, that's where Cardiff are looking at him to replicate that sort of form. And if he can, you know, there's no reason why they're being around it. So there's a few interesting signings that they've made. They got another lad on loan from Liverpool, Ojo, who, again, interesting player. Spent some time on loan at Rangers last season. Again, look, they're a solid team. You mentioned at the beginning they've had a couple of fleeting spells in the Premier League, so we automatically think that they're a Premier League team. But I'm not sure that is really the case. You know, I think they'll be, again, having the experience of manager Mick McCarthy, that they won't continue this sort of ridiculous run that they're on, because I don't think it's physically possible. But it'll certainly help them being around the top.
I mean, obviously, I can't skip over Kiefer Moore. Like you already said, he's been brought in, another player from a national league sort of background and lower levels of football. And we've seen this before in the late bloomers. I think he's 28 now, in someone like Jamie Vardy. So 16 goals for him this year. I think he's really solved those problems then that Cardiff have had up front for a couple of years now. I think I remember their right back was playing up front for a bit, and they've had numerous amounts of strikers that haven't seemed to work. So maybe now, once they get that sorted, they could be pushing for that promotion spot to the Premier League.
Yeah, I think you make a great point with the late bloomer like a Vardy. You know, they're out there. They certainly are. And I believe if you can score goals at one level, you can score goals. Like, you will score goals at other levels. It's whether you get the opportunity, whether you're playing in the right team. You know, I think if you're a goal scorer and you're finding the net, you know, you get the chances. You'll put them away. I think it's a natural thing, and you know, so I think we can see from his record he's always scored goals, and I think now he's getting a little bit more recognition for the weight of goals that he's scoring. In a Cardiff team that are obviously trying to push now and get themselves into the playoff mix and get themselves towards the Premier League, which no doubt they want to be. Is he another one that could get another move off the back of it? Possibly. Again, I think that's down to him and the goals. But if I'm a Premier League club and I'm looking at recruitment, I'm looking at financially where maybe the finances aren't going to be the same this summer when we're looking to bring in players. I'm certainly looking at the top end and the top goal scorers in the Championship and seeing can we bring any in this year. But again, it's again, if he can keep scoring goals, you look at say the top of the Championship at the minute. Yeah. Obviously, I think on top of everyone's shopping list is probably going to be someone like Ivan Toney. But if they can't get him, I think West Ham are linked with Adam Armstrong, who scored 19 goals. Yep. You got Lucas João, we talked about Pukki, we talked about Kiefer Moore, and Andre Ayew. They're the top scorers in the league. And, apart from Armstrong at Blackburn, who I think are a little bit lower in the league, and even Cauley Woodrow, who's got 10, they're all sides that are around the top. Dominic Solanke, another one. So, that's what we're seeing. And I think some of those players, if they can't get promoted this year, or even if they do, there's going to be a few Premier League clubs certainly sniffing around. So I'm really interested with the Adam Armstrong one because I think he come through at Newcastle and dropped down to League One. I think he was at Coventry and he scored quite a few goals there.
I think that's right.
Has scored a lot of goals for Blackburn in recent times. So, it'd be interesting what happens with that one, whether he gets the opportunity to go back to the Premier League or any of them.
Well, I think overall the Championship is actually a very interesting league, and even though we both don't watch too much of it, maybe just because we just don't watch too much football as it is, we should probably have a look at watching a bit more, especially towards the end of the year. I think you've got some quality players in there. We've talked about a number of different strikers, obviously Moore, Pukki, Toney, Solanke. All top clubs have got those exciting players, and that's probably why they are where they are. That pretty much wraps up today's episode. It's been good to have a look at all these clubs, all the clubs in the promotion places, both automatic and for the playoffs, and then obviously you've got a couple in Barnsley and Cardiff just outside that are potentially looking to push those clubs above them in the next few weeks. Always an interesting one to have a look at this, especially as us, Arsenal fans, Premier League fans, always looking to see who could come up, not just teams, but also those individual players that can come up and step up and really make a difference that we've seen over the last few years. One I can think of is someone like Mikel Antonio, someone that, and not for us for a while, came up and he's been very good for West Ham. So it's always interesting to have a look at these players and teams to see who can really make that impact on the big time. But as ever, we didn't have any guests this week. Obviously, hopefully next week we'll have someone on. But Matt, it's been great to talk again, mate. We always enjoy doing these. And even though today's was maybe slightly last minute, hopefully we've entertained everyone and give them a good insight into Championship football this season.
Yeah, like you said, maybe a little bit last minute, but I've enjoyed it. It's interesting to have a look a little bit more. Like you said, probably don't watch it as much as we maybe should, or but I'm certainly always keeping an eye out for certain teams and having a look at the top. And like you said, I think what we've looked at today is we've looked at some clubs that at the beginning of the season you'd have said yes, they're going to be in and around it. And I'm looking at your Watfords and Bournemouths and Brentfords and clubs like that, and obviously Norwich top of the league, but clubs that maybe are slightly a surprise, maybe Reading a little bit, certainly Barnsley, maybe Cardiff, just for how they've been. They're in the playoffs last year, but how they started the season. So it is good to have a look. And like I said, the Championship is the league of unpredictability. I think the Premier League's becoming that a little bit more, but I think the Championship is more so. And I would not be surprised if we see a team in the playoffs that we haven't spoken about today that make a surge towards the end of the season. It always generally happens. One team or two teams will fall away and one will really push themselves up the league. So, we've talked about 8 clubs today who I'd imagine out of those 8, there's a good chance 3 of them will be Premier League teams next year. But at the same time and same token, I wouldn't be surprised if, one of the teams below them really pushed themselves in the playoffs. I think, thinking back to that Huddersfield, I think Huddersfield crept into the playoffs on the last day, I think, when they got in the playoffs, and then they ended up in the Premier League. So that just shows you how the league goes and the opportunities for all the clubs, and you never know, do you? You certainly just never know.
No. Well, we appreciate this has been a slightly longer episode than usual. It's coming up to, I think, roughly an hour and a half now. But yeah, it's been quite a good one though. It's been a good one. It's been enjoyable. I certainly have enjoyed it. This week, do keep an eye out on our Instagram if you do follow that at WAMTG Pod. I might put a little poll out. Any suggestions, things you want us to talk about in the next couple of weeks? We're open to listening to them. I'm more than happy to answer any questions as well. Okay, guys, that's all from us. Good stuff. Keep talking football. Cheers.